Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today we're looking at the collection for the 1971 to 1972 story, Avengers, the Kree Skrull War. Frequently on this channel, I've called the first major Marvel crossover the original Secret Wars, and I don't think it's wrong to do so, considering just how much a crossover it was. It was the crossover most. Look at all those characters. But it certainly wasn't the first crossover ever. There were tons of those going around even before Secret Wars, but usually it was just one or two heroes showing up in someone else's title for a brief cameo and maybe a short fist fight, and then we moved on. The Avengers itself, like other team titles like the Justice League, was already the exception, bringing together under one title characters that had previously held their own comics. And as Avengers built towards its first 100 issues, it's not surprising that a major storyline would lead to massing together a ton of characters for the big event. And that storyline would be the Kree Skrull War. Up to this point in Marvel history, both the Kree and the Skrull had been relatively minor villains. Just the occasional nuisance types popping up to give trouble to one hero or another. The Skrull, for example, mainly appeared in issues of Fantastic Four, where they got their start with 4 Skrulls attempting to mimic the FF and ruin their reputation. The Kree also showed up as fairly minor villains for the Fantastic Four, but were a bigger part of the story of Captain Marvel. Mar-Vell, the character's true name, was an actual captain in the Imperial Kree army, who had come to Earth to study humans and eventually sided with them against his own people. The Kree were also important to the backstory of the Inhumans, a race of superhumans that history reveals were actually created by the Kree, as a potential army for a future war. So all of these elements already existed in the Marvel Universe, but had very little crossover before this point. That would change, of course, as we launch into this Avengers story, so let's see how that happens and take this away. The comic opens on Captain Marvel, looking real incognito in that trench coat. Definitely nobody will notice him now, except for the Avengers, who are chasing him down, attempting to stop him for reasons not yet clarified. But the real stab in the back comes from Rick Jones? What? Maybe this needs some explanation. Rick Jones here is like the teenage sidekick of the Marvel Universe. Seriously, he's been just about everywhere. Or will have been, eventually. Yeah. Rick first appeared as part of the Hulk's origin story, being the kid that drove into the nuclear test grounds that got Banner to run out and become exposed to the radiation that turned him into the Hulk in the first place. He would go on to be Captain America's new Bucky for a time, which is a sentence that sounds super weird out of context, until Captain Marvel got himself stuck in an antimatter universe called the Negative Zone. Fun fact, that's the name of the song I play when I cut to the breakdown. In order for Cap to get out of the Negative Zone, Rick Jones took to wearing the Nega bands, these silly slap bracelets that, when hit together, allow the two to Shazam their way to swapping places for a brief period. During his most recent time spent trapped in the Negative Zone, Mar-Vell is witness to a fight between Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four and the Negative Zone conqueror, Annihilus. Realizing Reed has a way to escape the zone, Mar-Vell calls on Rick to swap places with him so Cap can break into FF headquarters and utilize the machine to then pull Rick out of the NZ so that they no longer are forced to swap places. Cap's efforts at the Baxter building are crashed by the Avengers, or at least the B team that was left behind on monitor duty, and by Annihilus, who follows Rick through the portal. Luckily, the Avengers quickly realize who the real threat is, because, it's probably the guy that's busy monologuing about conquering and subjugating, and manage to throw Annihilus back through the portal. While the heroes were busy, Mar-Vell took the opportunity to steal their Quinjet and book it for Florida, hoping to grab his wrist-mounted laser that he calls the Unibeam. What Mar-Vell doesn't know, but the Avengers learn, is that his time in the Negative Zone filled him up with radiation, and now he's basically a bomb ready to explode. Since he won't stop and listen to them, he flees, which brings us back to the start of the story. Once captured, they're able to drain the radiation out of him using some questionable science and the Vision's own solar-powered cells to power whatever machine it is they're using. This process leaves both Vision and Cap weakened, which is bad, because right then, they're attacked by a robot! Oh, sorry, not robot. Living sentry. The sentry, in fact. Sentry 459, an android, not a man, of the Kree Empire. Sentry is following the commands of Kree supervillain Ronan the Accuser, who had, just moments before this, seized control of his home planet from a being called the Intelligence Supreme. The Intelligence Supreme is this sick-ass face and a gestalt entity, the combined intellect of all past Kree rulers, but by some means not really explained, even its great intellect was blindsided by Ronan's coup. So now as the new head in charge, Ronan orders the currently defunct Sentry 459 back into action, and the second string Avengers prove to have little effect on it. So it absconds with Mar-Vell like a kidnapped princess while ranting on about something called Plan Atavus. The Avengers don't have long to worry about their failure because they're immediately called away to Alaska by Goliath. Goliath, or this version of Goliath, is actually Clint Barton. Originally the hero Hawkeye, at this point Barton was taking Pym particles to be able to grow to massive size and thus be muscle for the Avengers instead of a sharpshooter. Probably Marvel didn't want the kiddies to play with bow and arrows. Goliath is calling on behalf of Hank Pym, currently Yellow Jacket, and Janet Pym, the Wasp, who were exploring in Alaska and discovered a stretch of jungle growing in the Arctic Circle. Hank seems to realize what's going on, and apparently with no other options available to him clearly, he straight up decks Janet and knocks her out. That's his wife, in case I didn't mention that. That's his wife, and he just punched her so hard without hesitation that he knocked her out. This dude's an asshole. Oh, we've got this thermal underwear and our love to keep us warm. Yeah, sure dude. Really feeling the love in this moment. Dude's an asshole. When the Avengers arrive, they find themselves once again facing off against the Sentry Bot and also Goliath, who is being mind-controlled by Ronan. They also find some caveman types that turn out to be a reverted Hank Pym and the 3 scientists that were on the expedition with the Pyms. Turns out, Plan Atavus wasn't some prescription drug plan like it sounds like, it was a process by which the Kree were going to turn back time on planet Earth, reverting everyone and everything to earlier points on the evolutionary chain to make the planet easier to conquer. Pretty sure they didn't have to turn the clock back very far for Hank over there. Dude's an asshole. Ronan and Sentry managed to capture Wanda and Vision and add them to their action figure collection next to Captain Marvel, which is mostly only significant because the duo choose this moment, despite everything else going on, to sort of vaguely reveal their feelings for each other. And hot damn, that's some lusty lip drawing right there. Sal Buscema knows what the people want. Vision turns away, not considering his robot self worthy of Wanda's affections, but Ronan finds their soap opera drama incredibly hilarious. Quicksilver and Rick, despite Ronan underestimating them, manage to break into Ronan's base, and in the confusion, Rick grabs Marvel's Unibeam, another sentence that sounds really bad out of context, and uniblasts the control machine for Project Atavus. This reverses the regression process and causes the base to be swallowed back up by the Arctic. As this is happening, Ronan gets an emergency call from the Kree Empire, saying that war has broken out between the Kree and the Skrull. And this panel right here, this is basically all we see in this entire story of the actual Kree-Skrull War. This one little shot. You think I'm joking? I'm not joking. This is a war on distant shores in a time when that really was an out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. But it's not the end of our story. Ronan just teleports away, leaving the Sentry without any commands, which ends with it just being swallowed into the ice alongside the base, while our heroes return home to the Avengers Mansion for some well-deserved rest and relaxation. Only things will of course not be quiet for them. The 3 scientists that had been turned into cavemen spill their story to the media, despite the Avengers having sworn them to secrecy to avoid mass panic. Now that the world is aware of the close miss of an alien conspiracy, a politician named H. Warren Craddock comes gunning for the Avengers. Craddock is an obvious stand-in for Joseph R. McCarthy, the famous politician who claimed to have a list of communist spies in the government, though of course he didn't because communism is just a red herring. But Craddock will similarly claim to have a list of citizens that are actually aliens in disguise. Maybe he should start by looking in his own house, though. Kinda looks like he's got Mr. Spock backing him there. At this point, Carol Danvers shows up in a rather overdramatic fashion that involves her crashing her chopper and having to be saved by the combined efforts of Mar-Vell and Vision, which briefly gets Wanda worried that Vision is hurt, which prompts the android into giving her a lecture about getting overly emotional. And I really hate how, out of context at least, this sounds like a "women, they do be emotional" rant. Quicksilver's not a big fan of it either. I'm pretty sure the intent behind this misogynistic screed is actually the Vision trying to say a relationship between them can never work out because Wanda has human emotions and he doesn't, but they could have, probably phrased it better. Whatever. Speaking of love, at this point, Danvers was mostly just a love interest for Marvel in his books, as we're still a good 5 years from her becoming even Miss Marvel. So her goal here is just to protect her Kree friend from angry mobs now that the alien invasion news has broken, and offers to take Mar-Vell to a farm she says some friends own. Seems kinda suspicious that she would show up this quickly with this solution, where she takes Mar-Vell away to some unknown place alone, but sure Marv, just head on out with her. What's the worst that could happen? Definitely thinking with his head. The Avengers aren't too worried about it though, because they've got troubles of their own. Kraddick has sent them a summons to appear to testify before Congress about the events up in Alaska. Kraddick's rhetoric has already led to a fervor of anti-alien bias, not that Americans ever need much prompting in that direction, and a number of protesters are already calling for the Avengers' heads. Avengers disassemble? Say, that's kinda catchy. The hearings start with the three scientists telling their sides of the story, including revealing that Mar-Vell is also Kree, and then we get some testaments from the Fantastic Four, because of their alien expertise. While Reed trusts the Avengers, Ben Grimm has his doubts about them. Remember, this was really early days for the Marvel Universe, and most of these characters had little to no shared history by this point. Kraddick then calls up Vision to testify, but ends up deciding not to bother, since Vision's just a dumb robot anyway, so his non-human testimony wouldn't matter. Viz still takes the opportunity to warn against the dangers of stochastic terrorism, but Kraddick is unmoved. Rick then suddenly runs out of the courtroom screaming and vanishes, prompting Kraddick to call a recess for the day. When the Avengers return home, they find protesters had broken in and messed the place up. Worse than that, the three main Avengers, Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor, show up right then and announce that they're disbanding the Avengers, because they're just so disappointed that these Avengers members would choose to shield Mar-Vell instead of answering to the public like responsible members of the team. The big three then just take off, and we cut straight to the Vision showing up to them alone, suddenly hurt and in danger, and he collapses and passes out in front of them. Apparently, the Avengers had called an emergency meeting, but other than Cap, Iron Man, and Thor, the only others to show up were Vision and Hank Pym, now returning in his classic Ant-Man getup, which is fortunate because the Avengers just happen to have need of his expertise, in tiny size, to have him go inside of Vision and fix whatever is wrong. Which gives us a trippy Fantastic Voyage issue as Hank mucks around inside Vision until he mostly magically fixes the android. That done, Hank immediately leaves again, having actually quit the team at the end of the Alaska adventure, and only showing up here for this specific adventure, apparently. With the Vision revived, the Avengers are surprised to learn that they disbanded the team, insisting that they in fact did not. And they listen as Vision describes everything that happened leading up to this point. After being kicked out, our second stringers decided to head to the farm where Carol took Mar-Vell. But as Vision flew over the farm's fence, he suddenly got blasted by lasers and collapsed in front of some cows. It seems the cows shot him down with lasers. Laser cows. I'm not kidding you guys, that's really what happened here. I love comic books so much. What's more, the first collected edition for this story featured a new cover by Neil Adams, who had taken over art duties for the story with this issue. That was based on this issue, of Vision showing up to the rest of the Avengers, but this time saying, 3 cows shot me down. I love comic books so much. These aren't just any cows though, and not just cause they can shoot lasers, but as Wanda and Quicksilver hurry to check on Vision, the cows transform into the Fantastic Four! But something's not quite right, because there's only 3 of them, and the thing suddenly has some Stretch Armstrong appendages. The Fantastic Cows, Cowtastic 3, Fantastic Beefs, Nah, I got nothing. The fake FF capture Wanda and Quickie, but Vision of course gets away using his ability to change his mass and density to sink into the Earth, and then floats back to the Avengers mansion. I just love the unintentional hilarity of prone Vision floating across the New York skyline. Good stuff. To cut to the chase here, those cows are actually just Skrulls in disguise. Sort of. They're 3 of the first 4 Skrulls to ever appear, having appeared back in Fantastic Four #2, where as I said in the intro, 4 Skrulls disguise themselves as the FF to ruin the FF's reputation. But the real FF won out by, I kid you not, hypnotizing the Skrulls into thinking they were cows. Only, in an interesting twist, when the panel was drawn depicting the cows in that original issue, only 3 cows were drawn. So for this story, only 3 cows appear, and the 4th Skrull may make an appearance later. These Skrulls were then revived from their hypnosis by some kind of special beam fired at the planet, and they began plotting their revenge, which included apparently pretending to be the 3 main Avengers when they disbanded the group. Meaning both that event never actually happened, and that there was really no reason for them to go back to pretending to be cows for this scene, other than that it was hilarious, and I'm so glad that they did. The remaining Avengers show up and subdue the 3 Skrulls, and also meet up with Rick, who had run here after leaving the courtroom because of a dream he remembered having of Mar-Vell being in danger. Meanwhile, inside the farmhouse, we learn that Carol was actually the Super Skrull all along. Super Skrull, who's been kind of the main Skrull enemy of the Fantastic Four, had been here hoping to trick Marvel into making a Kree communication device called the Omniwave Projector, which will be the Skrull's ultimate goal during this war. But thanks to the Super Skrull accidentally using Mar-Vell's real name, something Carol didn't know, Marv realizes the deception in time to destroy the projector, but not in time to keep from being knocked out. The farmhouse then also turns out to have been a disguise and was a Skrull ship all along. So Super Skrull takes off, leaving his 3 companions behind, with Mar-Vell, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver as his hostages. The first place he heads to is the secret home of the Inhumans, hoping to bomb the city and prevent the Kree from being able to use the Inhumans in the coming war. A protective force field covers the city just in time, so Super Skrull just gives up and runs back to the Skrull Empire. Oh, and Vision did briefly sneak aboard his ship, but immediately decided he was useless and peaced on out of there. Unfortunately for Super Skrull, his past failures to stop Mar-Vell have made him an outcast of Skrull society. And even bringing gift-wrapped prisoners now of Mar-Vell, Wanda, and Pietro doesn't get him back in the Emperor's good graces. The Emperor demands Mar-Vell build an Omniwave projector for him, because the Skrulls can send energy through it straight into the heart of the Kree Empire and win the war immediately. But Mar-Vell refuses, promising even torture won't make him reveal his secrets. So the Skrull Emperor, of course, just threatens Wanda and Pietro's lives instead. They're sent off to fight some weird pig lizard. I think that's called a Garignac. But instead almost wind up getting killed by weird tribble things that just won't stop multiplying. And Mar-Vell, unable to watch them suffer, gives in and agrees to make the projector. Back on Earth, the Avengers have returned home and found themselves under assault from some mandroids. These are special attack robots that Craddock sent after the Avengers after they failed to appear for the second day of investigations. Remember that whole trial thing that was going on? I guess that was important. The Mandroids were made by Stark Industries though, so Iron Man knows how to defeat them, even though at this point he's still pretending to be someone other than Tony Stark. Iron Man used to have a secret identity. Even the other Avengers didn't know it. This was an actual thing. This method for defeating them mostly seems to involve roller skates, because nothing says super cool high tech like freaking roller skates on his Iron Man suit. Man, looking so cool now, Iron Man. The Avengers are then approached by Triton of the Inhumans, who seeks their aid in tracking down Black Bolt, leader of the Inhumans, who is currently in San Francisco from a story in the comic Amazing Adventures. So together they go and grab the Inhuman King and then hightail it back to his homeland, where Black Bolt is able to dispel the force field still around the city thanks to his magic shouting power. The Inhumans in the city had been under the control of Bolt's brother Maximus, who was working with the Kree, and we learn in this story that when they were younger, Black Bolt discovered Maximus's alliance with the Kree and in a rage attacked the Kree ship that had come to make secret plans with Maximus. This had inadvertently caused the death of their parents, which Black Bolt believes to be the secret cause for the madness that rules Maximus's crosses his mind now. In the present, Black Bolt uses his words to shake free the minds of his people, and together they fight off the Kree and bring down Maximus. Though not before one of the Kree flies away with Rick Jones. The Avengers then head into space to try and recover all of their kidnapped friends, cause it's kind of a lot of them by now, but instead run across a Skrull armada, leading to a giant space battle as the Avengers attempt to scare them away from Earth. As for Rick, he's brought to Ronan the Accuser, who explains to him, and us, that the reason Earth is even part of this war is because it lies directly in the middle between the Kree and Skrull empires, giving it enormous strategic importance as a base, which means that both sides of the war either want to conquer it or completely destroy it so that the other side can't have it. Ronan decides he's going to keep Rick around, amused by his audacity, and Rick attempts to push his luck, attempting to goad Ronan into killing him so Rick doesn't have to spend the rest of his life as a prisoner. And then we turn the page and Rick's being thrown into a cell. I'll admit that's pretty good comic timing for a comic book. I do appreciate that bit. This is no normal cell though, but also the location where the Kree are keeping the Intelligence Supreme! Supreme explains that much of what has happened in the story so far has been by his design, as he has been using his vast mental powers to psychically push various people into certain actions, including giving Rick his dream, keeping Mar-Vell from realizing Carol was a fake, and having the Kree soldier kidnap Rick and bring him here. The Intelligence Supreme's plan was to fill Rick with vast energies, but Ronan detects his plans and attacks the room. In order to delay, the Intelligence has Rick reach into his memory and summon up a number of heroes from comic books he read as a kid, giving us appearances from a bunch of Golden Age Marvel comic book characters, including still active characters Captain America and Namor. We also have the original Vision, the original Human Torch, and the original Angel, as well as Finn, Patriot, and Blazing Skull. All of these characters existed in real comic books from the 40s, and many would continue to appear in stories after this. The Phantoms quickly fade away though, but they succeeded in delaying the Kree long enough for Rick to suddenly burst with energy. And suddenly all Skrulls and Kree everywhere simply freeze, with one notable exception. It turns out that Craddock was a Skrull all along, that fourth Skrull from the first Fantastic Four comic, the one that avoided being turned into a cow. He became a pig instead, if you get my meaning. Because he had disguised himself as Craddock to turn public opinion against the Avengers, but becomes a victim of his own hate-mongering as the anti-alien mob he stirred up, realizing that Craddock himself is an alien, swarm him and beat him to death. And thus is the fate of all Nazis. The Intelligence explains that this power is inside all humans, a power that will come to be known as the Destiny Force eventually, since it is human destiny to one day grow so powerful. Rick then collapses from not being able to handle so much power at once, and the Intelligence summons forth all the Avengers and Captain Marvel. Mar-Vell is informed that only he can save Rick, by once again joining their life forces together, leaving them being forced back into the situation where they'll have to switch places. Mar-Vell is hesitant, not wanting that curse again, but realizing he can't just let Rick die, he does agree. The Avengers are returned home where they meet with the real Craddock, who had been kidnapped by the Skrull who had taken his place, though Nick Fury discovered the truth and freed the real Craddock. There's no real resolution presented here of what became of all the Skrull and the Kree after they were frozen by Rick, but I guess we're meant to assume that the war has ended, at least for now, or at least that the role that the Earth will play in it has come to an end. The comic then ends with the Avengers realizing that Goliath isn't with them. He had last been seen chasing after a runaway Skrull during the space battle, and the assumption is he must have died. It'll turn out he's fine though, he just fell through a time warp, and when he returns to the team, he'll be Hawkeye once again. But that's a story for another time, whereas this is time to get to the breakdown. It's interesting looking back at an event story like this now. If something called the Kree Skrull War were to come out now, it would have a 6 to 8 issue maxi series that focused specifically on the war, and then a bunch of tie-ins to related and probably completely unrelated series that showcase fallout from the war or weird consequences. Instead, what we get is a story where the title is barely even a backdrop to the actual plot. The Kree and Skrull are heavily present, but the war is not. Instead, this is mostly a story about Rick Jones and Captain Marvel, that features some consequences for other major members of the Avengers. Of course, part of that is simply because the Kree Skrull War epithet is sort of an after-the-fact title, but also I'm not inclined to say one is better than the other. I enjoy the episodic nature of the storytelling from this time. Each comic is its own self-contained plot that then was tied together by a larger theme or event occurring around them. It could make the stories feel a little disconnected and random, but overall it was a great story with great art, and it would end up having a huge impact on the rest of the Marvel Universe. I do have a couple gripes, I guess. I really hate in these old comics how mewling and useless women were often written to be, even when they were male characters in disguise. No wonder men reading these comics grew up with such weird ideas of how women are. I also just don't like Rick Jones, personally. It's annoying how much these old stories have to tell us that the Avengers are the greatest heroes in the world, because what they show is them making idiotic mistakes so that they can be saved by some random teenager throwing a stone, as he's the audience insert character, so of course he has to save the day. I've never liked that tradition in any story, and I don't like it here, but I will say that this story does kind of feel like it gives some increased importance to Rick, so I guess that makes this a bit easier of a pill to swallow. So I'm giving this series a recommendation level of high. It's a fun and simple story with such large-scale ramifications for the Marvel Universe that it makes it a must-read for Marvel fans, and just a generally good time regardless. The collected edition gets 1 Skrull Cow. I named him Bessie. We'll mark that down as pretty good. I mean, it's amusing if nothing else. It's 9 issues collected here, which is a pretty good amount, even if it contains pretty much no other bonuses beyond a couple introductions. One from writer Roy Thomas, and the other from Neil Adams. I would expect more from Marvel's first big event, but it's not bad. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I had planned to spend the summer covering a bunch of Marvel event stories, but getting sick and getting behind on work has somewhat ruined those plans. I'll still get to as much as I can get to, and I'll try to keep some New 52 stuff going on the side as well. So if you did enjoy this video, or you're looking forward to that, or you're just feeling filled with the force of destiny, then make sure to hit the like and subscribe and all that good stuff so you can help the channel out. And you can help yourself out to be sure to be here next time. And I hope to see you then, right here, in the Comic Cave.